The answers do not come from the outside. There is no program in this whole world that can replace and reinstate the Blackfeet family values. We as Blackfeet have to do it ourselves.
What my mother represents is she's been able to take the essence of the spiritual crying of our ancestors. And I really think our ancestors are pretty disappointed in a lot of us, but they're not disappointed in Biddy Cooper.
Those first 5 years of my life, I had my loving family, my sisters and brothers, my mom and dad, living on the Little Badger Creek there, and my dad going hunting and bringing back elk meat. You know, they showed me what our culture was. That's the world I knew. You know, that's the secure, wonderful world that I knew. And then I felt like I was brutally put in boarding school where all of that was absent. I could not get up in the morning and see my mother's face. I could not come home from school in the evening and run to my father. You know, he wasn't there. The government and the missionaries tried so hard to do everything to erase what was Blackfeet, what was the Blackfeet essence, what was the Blackfeet's family values. We chose to run away in a blizzard, so we ran away in a blizzard. And we got to Browning without them finding us. My mother was shocked to see me, and more shocked that I had been living up in Browning for 3 weeks and that the police had caught me. They never even let her know that I had run away twice before. In order for my mother to take me to live at home with her, she had to go to the Indian agent to ask permission to have her child go home. They were really cruel to my brother. He ran away. He hitchhiked all the way up to our place up in the mountains at Cooper Lake, and my folks weren't there. My dad was away working, and my mom had moved to town, you know, and here he lived in our house, but, you know, I don't know what he ate. They said, oh, he's just a runaway, you know. They never even looked for him. And the matron didn't care. Nobody cared. And that summer, he drowned it. He drowned it at home in the lake. But his life was just miserable. And I used to ask my folks, why do you send us there? Can't we stay at home with you? You know, today, with my own 5 children, you know, I made a pledge to them when they were born that they would never, never go to boarding school. I said, over my dead body will my children go to boarding school. We were married July 31st of 1955. He was a hunter, he was a fisherman, he was a horseman. He's a great horse rider. And we did all those things together, you know, like when Theta was a baby that summer, I put a pillow on horseback I put a pillow on a saddle and I laid her on the saddle and we went fishing. My children would all be sleeping and I'd be standing there looking at them and just wondering, you know, what was their future, what was going to happen to them. I don't know, somehow maybe deep inside of me was a prayer that there had to be another way of life. There had to be somewhere we had a different chance at life. Those loving homes that I experienced were no longer there. There was no longer the elders who were the spiritual leaders who you could knock on their door and go in. So there was nothing for us. If I was ever going to own a home, it sure in the heck wasn't going to be on the reservation, you know. So I just felt like I had to leave, and it was the same feeling that I knew I had to run away from boarding school. I had to leave here. I had to leave the reservation. Theta's first experience at school, she was only one of a different color. I could hear her crying.
It was so painful, that realization that they weren't Blackfeet.
I found her behind the door. She was hiding. She said, "Mom, I don't want to go to that school anymore. They take my lunch money and they take my lunch." She said, "I just want to go home. I want to go home to my grandma." So I held her and I told her, "We can't go home. We have to make a life here." And as they became adolescents, you know, they would say really mean things to me. You know, they'd say, "Mom, you robbed us of our culture. You robbed us of our language. You robbed us of our grandparents. You know, why did you bring us to California?" You know, but they were young and they didn't know the life on the reservation. Before we left on relocation in '63, we were fighting over alcohol, his use of alcohol, and I'd try really hard to kick him out, you know, and he'd say, "No, this is my home, you know, I put the bread on the table, and these are my kids, and you're my wife." And the more he drank, the more possessive he became of me, the more jealous he was of me, accused me, you know. There was a long stretch, 8 years, I felt like maybe I am a no good person. Maybe I am this lousy person that he describes. Our relationship just, you know, really began to change, but I really hung on to my family. You know, I tried to keep our family together. You know, I remember one day I had some errands to do after I got off work. I came home and he was laying on the couch and recovering from another episode, you know, of drinking, and he said, "Where the hell were you?" And he said, "I bet you were with another guy. I bet you were with someone," you know. And, you know, I looked at him and I just thought, "You SOB, you know, I've really had it with you." I said, "Yeah, I was." I said, "I got off the bus and I was walking home," and I said, "and I met this really nice guy, really handsome." I said, "So I jumped in the bush with him, and that's why I'm late." That's why I'm late getting home. At that point, I didn't care what he thought. I didn't care what he thought about me. Finally, I came to the decision that I could no longer have this alcoholic, this drunk in my home. Even though I divorced, I spent the next 5 years going back to him. And I could see the reflection on my children. Theta, you know, was the oldest, and her and her friends got into their, one of the friends' parents' liquor cabinet, and they got really drunk, and oh, that just blew my mind. I said, "I am not going to have my children be alcoholics, you know, they're not going to drink," you know. And I really slapped her up, and I drug her in a house, and I filled the bathtub with cold water, and she was just drunk, and I was drowning her. I threw her in the tub, and I was holding her under the water, and then I realized what I was doing, you know, and I pulled her out. But at that time, I knew I was trying to drown all the alcoholism in the family. the historical alcoholism all the way up, and I didn't want that in my child. So I learned more and more that if we were going to make it and if my children were going to be all those things that I wanted for them, it was really up to me. When they seen me go to college, and I'd come home so excited, and we'd have these wonderful dinners eating together, and a lot of times it wasn't much because I had a small stipend and I had food stamps, and them each helping. Some would buy the milk, some would buy the bread, some would give their mother bus fare money to get to school. And when I graduated from the junior college, it was really a big celebration for our family, you know.
It was really where she was allowed some time to just learn and get a degree. And so once she did that, it broke open the dam of where that things were unlimited.
Well, I worked at the Friendship House, the Intertribal Friendship House, Urban Indian Child Resource Center, and then I became the director for the treatment program. All these treatment programs for alcoholism and drugs were male models, and there was really nothing for women. And I seen the women that had lost their children suffering so bad, you know, they were just walking in pain. We were the first Indian program to have women with their children, and it was so beautiful. In the Bay Area, the first powwows, there was a lot of alcohol, and we had a really bad incident of a father and mother fighting in the camp. The father backed over his children with his car. That was like the breaking point, you know, that no more, we're not going to accept this anymore. So we set up a site down at Casa de Fruta, down by Santa Cruz. And we had this whole ceremony, and that was to declare war on alcohol and drugs. Richard and all AIM and everybody decided to have a Sundance at DQ University, you know, and oh, that was exciting. They had a big sign at the gate, and it said, no guns, no cameras, no tape recorders, no alcohol, no drugs. Never thought I would see the day that our own people would say no more alcohol, no more drugs.
I think the attitudes about having to practice Catholicism to be a good person, the vice grip lessened on my family, I would say, after we had been away from the reservation about 6 years.
I start going to Sundances, and I start going to the Sweat Lodge and pipe ceremonies and everything in the Bay Area, you know. I would share that with my children. This is what I experienced. This is what I seen. This is what I felt. So good. I did not tell them, you have to follow the Indian way. You have to go the Blackfeet way. They have all went on their own because they felt it was a choice that they could make. And they are all now in native spirituality.
My mother admired Nelson Mandela for what he stood for. She said, well, I should type him a little note, and went to the airport. And so when the plane stopped, my mom lulu'd, you know, and African women do the same thing. Immediately, they wanted to know what that was and where it came from. They wanted to meet these Indians. So from the airport to the Coliseum, he reads this little note, and he's brought to tears. 12 minutes into the speech, he sets the speech down and he pulls out my mom's note. And history was made. Because he starts talking about the First Nations and the first people, Aboriginal people of this land. But soon as it ended, everybody in that whole world was looking for Betty Cooper.
Nixon had the whole relocation program reviewed. What he said, the relocation program for the American Indian was a 70% failure, because 70%, when they came, they did not stay in the city. They packed up and went home, left for home, you know. But they never did talk about the 30% who stayed, you know, and I feel like I was one of those 30%. And out of there came true blue, strong, wonderful Indian leadership from across the tribes.
She finally gave herself permission to move home.
People would ask us, when are you moving home? So they asked that question for over 30 years. And for me, of course, I see it as the absolute failure of relocation. It shows that the Indians went out there on their own agenda. The means may have been relocation, but they had their own agenda and their own path to walk. And part of hers is to come back home. She's made sure that the Sinew in all of us is connected here.
But I've seen the disparity in health care and the unemployment, and just the same things were there when I left in 1963. What I proposed was a social model of treatment, culturally based. We could not go without our language or our ceremonies as part of their treatment, you know, for the children and their mothers, the family unit and the community. I had no allies. I had nobody that thought like I did. And so the people that I hired, some of them had been at the hospital in a medical model of treatment, you know. But at the Pekani Family Healing Center, my staff had no Indian names. The women who came in with their children had no Indian names, and their children had no Indian names, no Blackfeet names. And so I met with a lot of elders, and I got naming ceremonies. But all the time I was having this staff problem.
People started getting jealous, and people, you know, wanted those jobs.
I was moved into town, and my office was in the hospital. The exact place, the absolute opposite of what my thinking, you know.
A couple of women came in who are good at their master manipulators. They came in and they maneuvered it and they took it away from her. And they enjoyed the funding, hired their relatives, and then the program fell apart. While they were taking her program away and taking her job, we were in the Sundance praying for them. It's painful when your own tribe stabs you in the back. She does not treat those people bad. She does not talk bad about them. She shakes their hand and she's good to them.
When I decided to run, all the youth that were at the school that I worked with really encouraged me, you know, and two of them became my campaign managers. I won, and I won by a landslide. I got more votes than all of the men. That was really neat.
I was concerned because of the amount of stress that I know my mom would be under.
Because I was the only woman on the council, and with 8 men, I just told them, and I tell them every day, every chance I get, I said, we were all elected equally, and we're all on the same team, and I am willing to work with you. This council never talks to each other. They never share. There'll be 2 or 3 in a closed-door session.
What leadership are we following?
Discussion for the council.
We'll call for a point of order here.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I was speaking and she always does that. That's my concern. That is my concern. Thank you.
The male dominance, we don't know exactly where that comes from except our education system, our church system, and it manifests itself in the dysfunctions of alcohol and drugs. Because we have to teach our own people, you know, that we were Christianized extremely well.
But I'm trying to change the Constitution, and it is a vote by the people. I will run for the chairwoman. And I'm not here in favor of this guy, or I'm not in favor of that guy. I'm in favor of the Blackfeet people and what's best for them. Every day I tell Creator, or even at the end of the day, I say, I did the best I could today, Creator. With all you have given me, the many gifts you have given me, I did the best I could today. And that's how I'll always do that.
You know, my mother she's all of our ancestors talking to us now. They're begging and they're pleading. If you have 1 ounce of Indian blood in you or 1 ounce of Indian spirit, then you got to get up. You got to stand up now. You got to fight for it. You got to fight for our water. You got to fight for our land. You got to fight for our ceremonies, and you got to fight for our language. I will never see Betty Cooper rolling over and saying, I give up. You will never see Betty Cooper give up. She'll be a radical till she dies, and she will fight for the things of Indian people until her last breath.